Hi. Now we will try to use Visual Studio and create our project. We will try to use the standard template that comes with a normal Visual Studio solution if you want to create an ASP.NET MVC or whatever. So open Visual Studio, click New, and we will try to create a solution file rather than a project file because we will try to create different projects and we will use references of those projects in the solution. So first of all, we click on this project and go in other project types, Visual Studio Solution, and we will click a blank solution. And we will name it auction, and that's it. So now Visual Studio have created a simple solution for us. And now you can click on this solution, right click basically, add new project, and we will pick on web and .NET Standard. Sorry, ASP.NET Web Application, and it's gonna be in our this auction. So we will name this auction.web so that we can use this as our namespace as well. And by the way, here you can select the .NET framework that you want to use. I'm just using 4.5. That was set as default with Visual Studio 2. Visual Studio 2017. Once it's done, click OK. And now here you can pick up an existing template. Either you can select an empty one, or a web form, or MVC, or web API, SPA applications, single page applications, or Azure API. So we will click on web forms, and basically here you can select enable Docker or add a unit test. I believe we will try to do something on unit test later, so I will click on this unit test. What it will do, it will create basically auction.web.test. So every project that is related to the test project, then the test project will have this .tst at the end. And so let's leave it now. So we'll just try to create a simple default web application that comes with it. So here it says authentication. So what type of authentication do you want? And we can say that no school. Sorry, this one is for individual user account. For applicant, the user profile, SQL Server database, user can register or sign in using a Link account for Facebook, Twitter, Google, whatever. So if you want Windows authentication, then you can click on this one. For internet application, for example, if you are working on a kind of a big enterprise, or maybe like a local council or some kind of big company where you have your own enterprise application that you use for your in-house normal work processes, then you can use Windows authentication. So we will just use the individual user account authentication. So press OK, and there is nothing more to select. Click OK, and it's going to create a empty project for us, but it's not going to be completely empty. It will have an existing template that already have this Microsoft identity in it and user management and everything by default. So once it's done, you can see that we have some default folders and files on it. Let's try to first of all, let's try to build the application and see what happens. And you can use Control-Shift-B to build it, or you can click here, and that's the shortcut key, build. If build is successful, then you can see here build 1 succeeded and 0 failed, 0 up to date, and 0 skipped. It means the project is built and it is ready to run. Before we run the project, just have a look on the web config file in which we will have all the configurations. And here you can see that this is the connection string, the default connection string, and that's your basically the local connection string to your system. So what it is doing is, in fact, it will create an Express database in the app data folder once we will start it. But I don't want to do this kind of work for like the Express database. What we will do, we will try to create a database in the SQL Server that I have here. And we will see that how we can change that web configuration file to create a database here by default when we run the project. So for that one, what we need to do is we need to set the data source. Here we will just say localhost. By the way, you can use localhost only if you have a default instance installed. Default instance means either you can use here localhost or you can use your machine name. So because I have a default host account installed, SQL Server instance installed, that's why I use localhost. And I don't need this application file name. The initial catalog is in fact the database name. So we will say the name auction to my database. Integrated security true. That means that if when our system is gonna try to connect with the SQL Server on the Windows, if you're trying to connect from your Windows, then by default it will use your Windows authentication. That means you don't need to use the login name or password for, let's say, for an SA account that we used in last lecture. We can create SA account, but if we don't want to, then we can just use integrated security true. And because if I try to log in my SQL Server using my Windows account that says here Windows authentication, and I can connect here, and I can connect, then my application should be able to connect. Second option, I can use SQL Server authentication, and I can say use my login and password, and I can connect. So if I want to use my login password, then I have to use login and password rather than integrated security. And how you can make sure that it is enabled or not. By default, it is always enabled. But you can right click on localhost, go here on security, and you can see Windows authentication mode, or you can say SQL Server and Windows authentication mode. So Windows authentication is going to be available anyway. But on this one, I have enabled both, and we have discussed this in previous lecture. So discussion, let's say. So this one is fine. It's going to work for us now. And that means that we have configured the web config in a way that the data source is localhost and initial catalog is auction. Initial catalog means database name. We have not created the database, and let's see if it can create this database for us or not. If not, then we will create the database, but I believe it's going to create this database. By default, it's going to use Entity Framework, and it has already added the references of Entity Framework in the system in our web config file. And this is just web Microsoft ASP.NET Identity. These are going to be the one of the you can say built-in modules provided by Microsoft, and it's going to be here anyway. And we have selected forms authentication. That means that we will use username and password on the form. And these are some extra what you can say like third-party or Microsoft default modules. For example, this Antler, Newton Soft JSON, web queries, entity framework, Microsoft OIN, Microsoft OIN security, Oath. Oath is basically open authentication thing, Microsoft OIN security cookies, and Microsoft OIN security. And then similarly, local DB connection factory. This is it's going to implement the default factory for creating connection with the SQL server. Because we are using SQL Server, so it's going to be the same. And this entity framework is using the default factory. And here is a provider. We are saying that it is going to be system.data.sql client. If you are trying to connect it to MySQL, then it's going to be system. I think it's system.data.mysql client. But you might have to install that as a NuGet package. So once it is done, then let's have a look what we got in our references. So we can expand this references one. So these are all the DLLs that have been added in the project by default from this project, because we selected to create a template project in which we want this kind of users and authentication registration module already built in. So Microsoft have given everything in it by default. Now, if you open this account thing, here you can see that these are some different web pages. They are already in the system. Add phone number, confirm, forgot or lockout, login, manage logins, manage password, open authentication provider, and register external logins, reset password confirmation. All these things are already here. And this is called the app start folder. In app start folder, whenever we start our application, whatever we have in this section is going to be by default as a part of app start. For example, the bundle configuration is one of the thing. What is the bundle configuration? What happens is that when you try to use different kind of JavaScript files, and you want some of those JavaScript files or all of those JavaScript files to be bundled in a single script file and then available it for download. For that kind of purpose, you use this bundle configuration file. And here you can see that we're doing nothing. Bundle is just a collection, and what we are saying here is bundle.add and a new script bundle. And this is the web form JS. So everything that goes in this one, it is gonna include scripts, web form JS, and then script, web form, web UI validation, and blah 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 blah. All of these JS files are in here. Let's have a look on the JS script file. This is the script folder. By the way, this sign, tilde sign, that means that it is a reference path from the web URL path. So if you're running it on localhost, let's say http:///localhost, and then your project name auction, and this path is going to be attached after that. So that means that this is basically from the root of your website. So that's why it has used this tilde for all of these scripts. So you can see that these all JavaScript files are coming from here. So these are all web helper JavaScripts, like web UI validation, web path, web forms, tree view, smart navigation, and all these. And similarly, you can add this the second bundle. Here you can see the comment. It says that order is very important for these files to work. They have explicit dependencies. It means that they have to be in the same order, because this file, the next coming file, might depend on the previous one, or basically it will depend on the previous one, but it doesn't have to depend on. For example, we have this third file. It doesn't mean that this file is dependent on both of these, but one of these. And this file might be depending on one of these three. So that's why the sequence is more important. And one of quite important thing is modernizer. So modernizer, what it does is basically when you try to use something for a JavaScript that that basically helps your browser behave as the one of the version that is supported by your application. For that one, you use modernizer. More information you can check on here for how and why we use modernizer. But this is basically how you bundle the modernizer and just use it. So you can see this modernizer. So when you use this kind of way to write the name, that basically means that go into the script folder and pick the file that starts with modernizer and have a hyphen in it, and then static means that whatever version is going to be okay. So for example, this one, that's the modernizer. So here you are saying that even in future, if I change the version of this modernizer, maybe you can use 2.9 or 3.0 or 3.5. So whichever file you use, you can replace it. And when you replace it, you don't have to change it here because it's going to pick up the modernizer. Whatever that is already there, it's going to pick it up. So once we can go through with all of these files one by one while we are doing our development. But there are some default pages. By default, what happens is that your default.aspx page is being called. And in ASP.NET Web Forms, we can have a master file like this one. This master file, you can see that this file is basically the main template of your application. So let's say if we try to click on Design View, and you can see that these are some sections, so some menu, application name. So this is basically the template that's gonna run throughout the application. And everything will be running in here. However, if you check it, so basically what this master page is doing, that's the head tag, meta tag, title of our page that's gonna be pushed in from the backend. And then here's the modernizer. And this is basically the name that we have mentioned in bundle config, this one, because we said that in this file at runtime include these ones. So your file is going to be like this one. And then you have the bundle reference of CSS file, and you have this favorite icon that is going to be the link. And then we have this web form. And in this one, we are using ASP Script Manager. Whenever we want to use Ajax, when you want to submit the partial page or some information within the page without postback, you use this Script Manager for Ajax. And to learn about bundling scripts, you can follow the link, this one. However, these are the script references, and that's the bundle, jQuery, Bootstrap, WebJS, and these are all assemblies and references of files. Next, this is a class, basically a div in which we are creating a top menu. And then top menu have some kind of CSS that is already been provided in this as a built-in. And most of the static contents are in this content folder. So you can see the site CSS and Bootstrap CSS and all this stuff. And here, that's the application name and like home, about, contact us. And here we have this ASP Login View. A login view, you can see that if user is logged in, then basically anonymous template is this one, where you can say when user is not logged in, then the option is going to be shown as register or login. But if it is displayed there, then logged in template is going to show you my account manage, like hello Vakas, and this is your username, and here's the logo that if you you want to log out, then you can click on this one. And then this is the content placeholder. So basically, whatever page you will create, it's gonna render within this content placeholder here. So, and then there's gonna be a line, and then we have a footer template. So whatever we use is gonna probably come here. So this is the HR template, and this is the main content. So once we have all, we will go through this throughout our project that we are trying to develop, some kind of small auction application. But now let's say that we have this default thing in here. That's the default page. So the first page that will be displayed is going to be the default page. So this is what it's going to display us on the main screen. However, you can now see that it is showing you, you cannot click here, but it is showing you something here. It means that it is actually showing you this page within the master page. So master page is just a template, how you want to display the information, or the main generic things like footer, header, left panel, top panel, right panel, whatever. And then this is the page that is going to be displayed there. So by default, it is using IIS Express, and we will just leave it to use as IIS Express. We have already built this project. Let's click on play icon and see what happens. So now it has basically loaded the page, and that's in Chrome. So this is a built-in by default template of an application that comes with the Microsoft identity. Here you can see when you this number is basically the port, because we have not used IIS standard version that we installed. It is the default Dev Express edition that is being used, and this is the port number on which our application is running, and this one is the default page. So here you can see that when you move your mouse on application name, at the bottom at this point you can see the URL that shows you where it's gonna basically redirect this page. So home, about, contact, and that's a registration page, that's a login page. Okay, so we can now see that on the SQL Server it should not have created the auction database yet. So you can see there's no auction database, no database at the moment. And let's click on register, and we will try to register the first user. Let's say password, we will say PASSWORD123 and click on register. Oh, at least one character, and okay. So we will now try to use the password, this one. So at least one letter. Enter it. And so this is the password that I'm gonna try to use now. So it is taking some time because now it is trying to create a database behind the scene. And job done. So now if we go in database and try to see what's there, we can see that we have an auction database, and you can see which kind of tables it has created. So these are the ASP. So leave this table right now. We will discuss this later. But ASP.NET roles, ASP.NET, ASP.NET user claims, logins, user roles, and users. So you can see in here ASP.NET users, and that's the ID. That's the email that I have used. The email is not confirmed. That's the hashed password. That's the security stamp, and that's the phone number. Phone number confirmed. Two-factor authentication enabled or not, or account locked out or locked out enabled. So, and these are the settings. That's my username. And let's say that if we go now on home, about us. So this is the about us page. You can see the URL here and contact, and that's the simple contact page. And you can say click on log off. So when you click on log off, it is gonna lock you out. And now if we try to create another user, let's say so this time it has taken just a second because the database was already there. So Entity Framework has not tried to create a database because it has found an existing database. So let's now go through the code that is basically managing all these user things. Let's try to run the app again, and I would like to see the pages that it shows us, and also try to see if it can give us the option of forgot password or not. So if we click now on login, we can see here it says register a new user, but the forgot password link is not enabled. It means that we need some kind of configuration settings or some kind of code that has been commented out so that we can enable that option. One of the main reasons is that you have to have some kind of SMTP setup so that if user clicks on that link, then obviously you need to send some kind of email, then retrieve the password, and then obviously allow user to change the password. And this section also, you can see that user use another login service. External authentication is not activated yet. For example, if you want to allow user to log in from using their Facebook account or Google account or let's say Microsoft account, then you can use that one as well. This section is also not enabled. So to see more details how you can do this or how you can easily wait a minute, let's open this link in a new tab. Here you can find most of the tutorials. I was thinking that it's going to take us directly to the link, but it has not. Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's now go to the account section. So first of all, we will go to accounts, and here you can see that's the login page. So let's see what we got on the login page. You can see here, look, this section is commented out. Enable this once you have account confirmation enabled for password reset functionality. Then it's gonna show us. Let's see if we remove this comment and press F5. It's gonna build and run. Basically, rather than clicking the play button again and again, you can just press F5. And so here you can see this one. So we need to remove this text, but once you click on this link is actually not working because we have not enabled it. That's why it's not behaving like like a hyperlink. But this tells us that there is some kind of information available. So the feature is there, but we need to enable it. And similarly, this section we can see is the open authentication. So once we enable that one, then you can use open authentication or auth modules. So let's see what happens when you try to enter login and password, or maybe we can see what happens when we try to first register the user. So that's the register page. Now on this one you can see that there is a email and then a text box, and then there is a required field validator. And then similarly the next one is password field. There's also a text box and there is a required field validator where you can basically set some kind of validation, like you should have some kind of numeric values or alphanumeric or a special character or whatever you want. And then this is called the confirm password, and its text mode is password, and that's the class. Compare validator and regular required field validator. So you can see on the password field we just have the required field validator, but on confirm password we have the compare validator as well, because when you allow user to enter login and password, you want them to enter the same password both times, because this password is going to be used obviously for further registration and something, but this field is going to be only used to match the values because we don't display the password. So if you click on the design view, you can see here that this is the literal error on the top of the page, and that's the title of the page. This is where user enters emails and then password and then confirm password and then register. So what happens on register? If you click on this button and click on split, this is already highlighted. So here it says on click, it's gonna call create user underscore click function. If we go now on the code behind, .NET page consists of two files, basically the front end and the back end. So this is the code behind file that is in C#. And here you can see the create user under click function is written. So when you click on this button, it runs at server. It means that it's gonna call a function on the server, and on click it's gonna call this function create user underscore click, That's the text on the button, and this is the class CSS, the style sheet on that button. So you can see here that on this one we are using the context, which is basically the HTTP page context, and that get OIN context, get user manager, and here it says application user manager. Sorry. So here we create a user object that is an application user type object, and we just pass the username and email as a text, and then in identity results we are saying that manager.create user and then that password. If a result is succeeded, then do this, and if it's not succeeded, then show the error message. Like initially it was showing us some kind of error message. So here if you want to enable SMTP thing as well, then you can set up uncomment this file, these lines, and here you can say that like generate email confirmation token user ID, and then if the user is enabled, then you need to allow users to log in. And at the same time, if it is successful, then you are using sign in manager to sign in the user and then redirect the user to the return URL. And what was the return URL? Let's have a look. So when you click on register, it's not showing any return URL here. It means that it needs to be set from somewhere in here for the return URL. But this is how it is registering the user. We will go in detail one by one, like what is this context, what is the application user, what is this identity result, and how it's going to create the user. But right now we can just see that this is the code that it is working. So now we will look into the models. You can see here in the models folder, so that's the identity model, and here this is the application user. So the class that we are trying to use here, this application user, if you right click on this one and go to definition, it takes you to the identity model, and whatever class you are in, if you click on this one, it will highlight the file here so that you know which file it opens. So for example, you come here, you could right click, go to definition, and then click on this line, so it's going to highlight that this is the file here. So application user inherits from identity user, and there's a function generate identity. And how it's going to generate identity is that you need to pass the application user manager in it, and that manager is going to be used to create an identity. And similarly, get user identity async, that means that this is the generate user identity async. We will discuss later what's the difference in standard call of a function or an asynchronous call of a function. But at the moment, this is how it works. So this claim identity, it's basically the same function. The only thing is that this one is gonna be called in the same thread, but this one is gonna be called as a task, so the asynchronous call, so that your application will remain responsive rather than just waiting for this one. Now here you can see that there is another class that says application DB context. So application DB context means that this is our database context. So what we will have in database context, and we are saying that it inherits from identity DB context, and it uses application user. So this is our application user, and it is using our application user type of identity DB context, and we have named that as an application DB context. So whatever our application database context, this is the database context. And here it says that on the constructor of this application DB context, that's the name of connection string. default connection. So if you go to your web configuration file, you can see that the connection string section is here, and here we have the default connection. So basically this is the name of the connection string that you have to pass here. If you want to create another connection string, let's say my connection, then you need to change that here as well. And that is the static DB context. Now here we have some simple helper functions. We will talk about these later, like cross-site scripting, anti-forgery, and all these things. But you can see that the namespace we mentioned was auction.web. So this is our namespace that has been added to all the modules that we currently have in here. So similarly, this one is the login page, and here you can see user email and password, and that's basically the hyperlink, register as new user. And now we will try to see what we are trying to accomplish in here. So this is basically the content, and this content means that this thing is gonna be pushed into master page, this one in here. So between these two, ending and closing, it's gonna push in whatever is in this one. So there is this open authentication provider, ASCX. It means that it is a control. So we can see that in accounts there should be open authentication provider ASCX. So this is already in there, and because it's a user control, so you can see the design view of this user control, and it's just a list view, and it's showing you basically the provider details. Use another login service to log in. So, but we are not using this open authentication or auth tokens yet. That's why we are not working on. We're gonna ignore this one for now, but later we will try to understand how it works. And then it use Bootstrap, and all these classes and files, these are the style sheets from Bootstrap, and that's just a placeholder. And this placeholder means that you have given it an ID of error message, and it's not visible initially, but it's gonna be visible on some kind of action that you perform, like for example user cannot found or user is inactive when user try to log in. And then you can see that in this one div we have created an ASP label. Run at server means that this is gonna run at server, and then associated control ID, like this label is associated with which control, with email, and here is the email control. That's a text box. And CSS class on that one is this one, and then that's the text on that label. And then similarly we have these required field validator. And then similarly we have another one that is called the password. And what happens when user try to log in, basically? So when you press on this login button, that's the one, and it calls the function login. So if you go on the code behind, and you can see that this is login. So this, when you press login, if is valid means that if this page is valid, if all the required field validators, comparison validators, or whatever validators that you have on the page, If all those validators are gonna work okay, then it's gonna pass into this function. So here you get the context on context user manager, and then you get the sign manager, and here you are trying to basically this email address and the password to see that if you want, if the user can successfully sign in or not. If the result is success, it means if it is okay, then you need to redirect the user to this URL if there is some kind of URL, or if it's locked out, then you need to show the user at this account logout. And if there is some kind of verification required, for example, you have implemented two-factor authentication, like or maybe like MFA. In fact, the real name is MFA, multi-factor authentication. That means that either it is a password, or it's some kind of a key, or it's kind of OTP, one-time password generator, that's been sent to the user, and user might have to enter that password, or some kind of PIN code, or some kind of PIN code and password, or some kind of a phone call that is coming in, and you can pick up the call and you can answer it, or you can take the number from the PIN call, from the phone call, and put it here. So whatever, that's how it's gonna work. And that's managed. So some of the information is basically disabled here as well, and we will keep going on in our next sessions on how we will create it. We will basically enable all these functions, manage logins. We will enable this reset password thing, the reset confirmation, two-factor authentication, verify phone number, and forgot password. So for this session, I believe this is okay, and I would like you to give it a try. Just let's say at least once, and try to see how it works, try to understand the things, and then we will pick up these things one by one, enable them, create them, and we will then start changing from here. Thank you.